Reid Detmers and Dylan Cease are back, baby. Let's discuss on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5 on Tuesday, June 27th. I am Frank Stanfield, joined by Scott White, and let's talk about two pitchers that were going up against each other on Monday, and both look to be back on track. Reid Detmers over his last 4 starts, a 1.05 ERA, a .78 WHIP, 34 strikeouts over 25 and 2/3 innings. Dylan Cease over his last 5 starts, a 2.20 ERA, a 105 WHIP, 42 strikeouts over 28 and 2/3 innings. Scott, are you buying back in on both Dylan Cease and Reid Detmers?
Well, it's easier to do with Cease, I would say, because it's been a longer stretch of success. And these last 2 starts, he's thrown a slider about 50% of the time. Normally, it's been 40% of the time. Really getting back into the groove with that slider has been the key to the turnaround here for Cease. I still don't think he's going to be as good as he was last year. I never thought he was going to be as good as he was last year. There are too many walk issues and whatnot. But he's at least back to being a high-end bat misser again, and I think that makes Dylan Cease a top 20 pitcher in fantasy. I think the more interesting one here is Reid Detmers, and now it hasn't been the same run for him, but just like Cease, the key for Detmers it really comes down to the slider. And this has been a very long saga. It dates back to last season even, where Reid Detmers at the start of last season was pretty ineffective, got sent down to the minors about halfway through, comes back. He's throwing his slider like 3-4 miles per hour harder and looks great. It's a big reason why he's such an attractive sleeper coming into this season. And then in spring training, the slider's up even more. Well, more velocity is good, then even more velocity is better, right? But that didn't turn out to be the case. He was pretty inefficient for most of this season. These last 2 starts for Reid Detmers, they were his first 2 7-inning starts of the year. They were he allowed just 2 hits over 7 innings in each of them. And the other thing those 2 starts have in common for Reid Detmers, the average slider velocity down 2 miles per hour to what it was after he came up from the minors last year. So he's back to where he was after the initial velocity bump and not the second velocity bump. And it seems like that's the sweet spot because he's been amazing these last 2 starts. And I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that it is what gets Reid Detmers back on track. I'm moving him up like 25 spots in my pitching rankings based on this hope.
All right, good stuff there from Reid Detmers and Dylan Cease. Let's fire up the drop-o-meter for hitters that have really slowed down in the month of June. And first up is Nolan Gorman, who so far this month is batting .143 with 2 homers and a 42% strikeout rate. He's still 87% rostered. Scott, where does he fall on the drop-o-meter 1 to 10?
I'm going to go about a 5 here for Nolan Gorman. Right in the middle. I think it's fine in points leagues, which tend to be smaller rosters, so you have alternatives at second and third base. And that's going to be Gorman's lesser format anyway because the strikeout rate's so high. I hesitate to do it in any categories league, especially roto leagues, where you have all the extra lineup spots to fill. How I think this is going to play out with Gorman is he's going to get insanely hot again, probably sooner than later. I think he's a player of extremes. He makes high-quality contact with a lot of power when he makes contact, but he also has major strikeout issues that have caused him to go ice cold here of late. So, it just kind of depends on the depth of the league, whether or not you can realistically drop Gorman, but I don't think he's just done for.
All right, what about Giancarlo Stanton, who in 17 games since returning from the IL is batting .121 with 2 homers and a 34% strikeout rate. He is still 93% rostered. Scott, Giancarlo Stanton on the drop-o-meter.
So I don't see doing it in a 5 outfielder league. The alternatives available on waivers at that position, they're bad. And, Stanton still has a lot of upside. He still hits the ball basically as hard as anybody. So if he were to get insanely hot, kind of like the scenario laid out for Gorman, that wouldn't be terribly surprising. But I'll put him more like a 7.5 on the drop-o-meter because obviously he's older than Gorman. And this has gone on for quite some time now. So he's batting under 200 for this season. Over the last 4 months of last season, a 70-game span, because, he missed some time with injury during that stretch, but over a 70-game span last year to end last year, Stanton hit 166. So that's a long time of him batting under 200.
For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Audacy app, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.